it's just about being humble, being ready to be wrong
Yes.
by all means,
Yeah.
and correct the record if you are wrong. It's like, oh, my
Yes.
apologies. I'm so sorry. You were right. I didn't think about it that way. Right. That's how we move forward.
It
That's how
is.
we improve in communications. It requires a humility, and it requires a subduing of the ego. And most people don't know how to subdue the ego because most people believe they are their ego.
All right, I'm here with my great friend Joel, again here in Arizona. I want to thank you for joining me. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, my brother.
I thought you would be awesome for this project, wanting to know how we can better communicate as human beings. You're a combat engineer. You're eyeballs deep in physics. Some of the best conversations I've had in physics has been with you. Somehow we end up across from each other at some of these other events and stuff like that. And
Yep.
man, we go for it.
I love it.
It's pretty awesome. What's new? What's new right now? What are you looking at in physics? What's caught your eye?
Well, I'm still continuing to research into an electromagnetic nature to gravitation, which is an extremely deep rabbit hole. But, studying loop quantum gravity versus Newtonian gravitation versus Einstein's gravity, they all have something that all theories agree on must necessarily occur. And every other theory, mind you, no matter what, and that is electromagnetism. Electromagnetism transcends all others, all physical theories, right? There's electromagnetic nature to everything. If you're dealing in the quantum realm, you have something as fundamental as the hydrogen atom, for example, right? You got a proton and an electron. The proton is a positive charge, electron's a negative charge. There's your orbitals. Now, if at the most fundamental level there is charges present, why can there not be charges present, as Einstein tells us, must be necessarily occurring in and around all matter? Why can that not be the connection between the micro and the macro, right? So it's a lot of work. There's a lot of details in the mathematics to combining the formalisms, but through an unsuspecting source, there is a lot of reconciliation that is able to be made when referencing ancient Western philosophies, such as the Kabbalistic principles, right? The Hermetic philosophies, and even the most concise but yet kind of hidden in its wording is the Holy Bible. It contains all of these things. And that was one of the most fascinating discoveries I've made, right? Because I've read the Bible since I was a kid. I was raised a Catholic. And some of these concepts were just really hard to grasp, mainly because they were grown up things, right? That I just hadn't experienced yet. But then, as a physicist, researching the real fundamental nature of our universe, um, I came to the realization that there is a lot of contradictions and incompleteness in what seems to be not intentionally, deliberately, but a myopic perspective. Again, each university studies different parts of physics, and their theory's right, others are wrong. Sometimes, almost like religion, right? But the fact of the matter is that when electromagnetism, transcending all theories, is very foundational. So um, the process is long, but my research is there. And the most fascinating thing about the Bible is that for any good space-time theory, you need time, space, and matter. And that's contained in the first sentence of the Holy Bible, right? In the beginning, there's your time. God created the heavens.
Yeah.
There's your space. and the earth. There is your matter.
Then you got gravity and inertia.
And I mean, that's it, right?
Yeah.
But nothing happened. Nothing happened. It was dark and void, as it says, right? But the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And it wasn't until God gave the great command, let there be light, that the Spirit pervading all things instantly manifested light, which is in our case as humans, as we know, in order to exist, light being synonymous with life, right? Again, in electromagnetic nature. But there we have it. So there's a lot of connections, way more than I can take too much of your time here to elaborate on. But it is just, it's just been fascinating, a journey. I mean, even being a quantum physicist, I wish quantum theory was correct, but hey, electromagnetism seems to have the answer. So I've been going down that rabbit hole, and it seems to be very capable. The only limitation, and the only biggest limitation, is the empirical speed of light.
Yeah.
I believe that to be an extreme limitation.
Yeah.
Again, you know, with
It
the
is. It
planets,
is. It is.
the
Something's
distance of the planets,
100,000 light years away. How are you going to get there in 100,000 years? You can't. You
you,
got to have something totally different.
and that's only if you're capable of traveling at the speed of light.
Yeah.
But remember what
Yeah.
Werner Heisenberg tells us, right? Or like the Lorentz contraction, for example. Let's speak relativity theory since we're talking about light and
Yeah.
velocities. Lorentz contraction states that the faster you go in your z direction, the shorter the object is that you're traveling on, right? Including yourself. The shorter and shorter it gets. And the closer you get to light speed, the smaller it gets. So now we think that if we're talking about a Big Bang universe, a 93 billion light year diameter would take a photon 93 billion years to traverse from the outside perspective. Yeah. But now, if it is actually traveling at the speed of light, and Einstein and Lorentz are both correct, now that photon has zero spatial extent. It experiences, because of time dilation, it experiences no passage of time.
Yep.
So it, through its own perspective, not only becomes scalar as a background, no longer a vector or an object, but now a scalar nature because it just vanished.
Yeah.
Now it can traverse the universe's 93 billion year diameter in no time at all.
That's right.
Through its own perspective. So now that, I think that's an issue. I think that's a big issue because we're talking about gravitation being, in Einstein's case, a bending of the fabric of space-time. But even that takes time to actually expand and move, right?
A little bit.
So now if gravity was massless, it can also travel at the speed of light. But now that still leaves 8.6 minutes of temporal disconnect between the sun and Earth, for example.
Yeah.
So now we know the sun is itself orbiting the galactic center and possibly another binary star that we haven't been around long enough to observe, but it is in motion. So now we're to believe that the Earth is capable of catching up to where the sun was 8 minutes prior. How? I liken it to two basketballs, for example, tied together by a rubber band. Now, it takes time for it to extend and build enough tensillary strength for it to draw it. So that's the time for, as example, that gravitation would take to reach the other sphere. It's catastrophic and disastrous. Yeah. Now, that's not even to mention the 4 hours it would take before Neptune even knew that the sun flinched. So there's a lot of unexplainables there. Now, Newtonian gravitation is a lot more instantaneous. But what could possibly manifest instantaneously? Because remember, Einstein emptied the universe of the ether, right? Based on the Case Western Reserve University experiment in Ohio, where the 3 lanterns were placed on top of mountaintops, and they were detecting any etheric winds.
Yeah.
To 10 to the minus 17 meters is a very precise laser light experiment, but that was over 100 years ago. It's never been revisited. That was nowhere near even Mount Everest, which would have probably at that elevation gave a little more specific readings, but it wouldn't have in any case, because now we know that the Earth has a magnetosphere, right? That magnetosheath extends much further than the space station, I tell you that. So You're not going to detect any etheric winds until you go beyond that.
Yeah.
And the etheric winds, as we know with the magnetosheath, are being blown and affecting our magnetosphere, right? Those are the etheric winds that Einstein said did not exist. But why has that not been revisited now with our modern technology? Why is that still gospel, right?
Yeah.
So I don't believe that the universe is empty. I do believe that gravitation is a little more instantaneous, but how can you explain that? Well,
Yeah. This is
let's think
we're flying in
electromagnetically.
soup right now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's think electromagnetically, right?
Okay.
Even through Einstein's subtractive gauntlet, where he said that based on the Michelson-Morley experiment that we just described, no etheric winds were detected, and therefore there will be no either considered, and that was the special relativity. So he emptied the universe, right? Now all of a sudden there's no way for electromagnetism to occur, but yet because of Maxwell's electromagnetism, that any particle interaction is going to generate its own electromagnetic field, Einstein was unsuccessful in eliminating electromagnetism. He eliminated the need for quantum mechanics, but he could not, like no other theory can, eliminate the necessity of electromagnetism.
Yeah.
So now we look at, like, for instance, electric arcs, right? Whenever you see these giant power lines with hundreds of thousands of volts going through, they oftentimes open them and then close them, right? So now when they open them, you can see the electric arc forming for quite a distance.
Yeah.
So
Those
much
electrons
energy.
are just flowing. Yeah.
They are connected. They're not
Yeah.
flowing at the
Yeah.
speed of light, but they are there,
Yes.
right? So if that can exist as a vector in space-time, then our planets would have more of an instantaneous response to the sun's motion, right? So then you think, okay, well, that would actually also explain why it is that planetary orbitals tend to be on a plane and not like the atomic model, right?
Yeah.
Not all over the place, because there's nothing in relativity theory or Newtonian mechanics to say that that cannot happen.
Yeah.
But in electromagnetism, it's just such a neat setup. Like, what if the sun had a North Pole and a South Pole, positive and negative? It'll come back down to itself in the center and create a plane. That plane on which the planets orbit and move just fine all the way along. That was an issue when they discovered how galaxies orbited. That's when they started inventing dark matter and dark energy, right? Yeah. And the Higgs boson, but that's another story. So that's where we're at, and I believe it to be electromagnetic in nature.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more
We're getting
details I can
there.
go
We're
into
getting
there.
there's a lot of research on that. There's
Yeah.
I often wonder with a lot of stuff I've been able to see, um, if humans, if we will get to a point where we have, but where it comes out, anti-gravity,
Hmm.
that's going to answer, and it has answered so many of these questions. Let's say a craft crashes, right? And we look at it. We look at the metamaterial, and that material is made of aluminum and bismuth, right? Think about how electrons move throughout aluminum. Bismuth, it's like going through soup, right? Then you take silica dioxide to bind them, or like a polymer, right? And now you have this living skin. Look at the semiconductor. Where did that shit come from?
Yeah.
Right? Now you have a 0 point vacuum system which shoots a terahertz across this thing, right? You're using magnets that are associating with electromagnetic field, the planets, everything. Now you can steer it. Now you throw a little AI system in there, and then it creates that ball of whatever around it, and time, inertia, and everything in that ball stops. And
Yeah.
you can go 1,000 light years away in about, I don't know, 8 seconds.
Feeling absolutely no inertial
Nothing,
forces, right?
nothing,
Being
nothing.
completely
Totally,
insulated from the effect of
totally,
gravity. Yes,
totally,
that's what we need to look into, but
totally.
that's what's also going to be more in the dark projects, right? That technology does
Yeah.
not want to get out. There is no nation on earth that wants any other nation to know that
That's
they
what I'm
are
saying.
studying
As a
that.
human species,
Yep.
man, this is the holy grail. I know it is. It's not really even monoatomics. It's getting in. There's this field in between the microwave spectrum and the infrared light spectrum. And in that field is where you can communicate as well
Absolutely,
beyond
that's the
space
furthest
time.
reaches. That's the energy that you want to communicate
Yeah,
intergalactically with,
yeah,
and that's what does. And as a matter of fact, lower frequency, long wavelengths,
yeah,
they permeate almost everything,
yeah.
right? Because when you have
And they
higher energy,
permeate everything, right?
permeate
And you can bend
everything.
light around it, which makes it
Yeah,
disappear.
absolutely. So, I mean, that's what's fascinating because, I mean, with high energy, it's like our 5G towers out here, right? It's super high energy. A lot of data can be
Heat,
contained within it,
too
a
much
lot of
heat.
heat it generates. But at the same time, because of the nature of the highly oscillating energy, the amplitude is up there, right? That prevents it from being able to necessarily pierce through anything. It's kind of
That's
like a
right.
bullet trajectory, right? If the bullet is going at an angle, it glances
Yeah,
off. So it's easy to block high energy, high frequency
yeah.
waves, but those lower frequencies are going to go through almost everything.
Man, you can see things fourth dimensionally at that point, right?
Yeah, I
All
would believe
around,
so.
inside and
And
out.
you know what? That brings up another interesting point. It just reminded me when you were talking about that anti-gravity nature that not having to do with that, but there is this science that's called sonoluminescence, and what they do is essentially they put almost a semi-spherical vat
Yep.
filled with the clear fluid, distilled water, mineralized water, however, and then you would set speakers all the way around in a very symmetric fashion. Okay, you can tune the frequency of the signal specifically to project into the very center of the star, in center of the jar. And as a matter of fact, a star does manifest.
Yes.
And the temperature detected within that star in a jar is what the project's called, actually matches the temperatures of the stars that we detect in outer space. So now that brings a whole new meaning to God speaking the universe into existence.
Yeah.
Sonoluminescence.
There's the movement. There's the energy right there.
Light projected through sound.
Yeah, and life is movement.
It is motion. Everything is in motion.
Yeah. You know, there's this force that is everywhere in this bubble you talk about, right? And it's not affected by anything. It's not affected by heat. It's not affected by, you know, it creates gravity, it creates inertia, it creates time. Man, we got to tap into that.
Absolutely. Oh, you remember the whistleblower from Area 51, the scientist who was what was his name?
Oh, Lazar.
Lazar.
Yeah.
He said that while studying the movements, the operations of these spacecraft that he swears Area 51 has, he called it S4 of Area 51, where he studied these.
That's
and
where, that's
yeah, he wanted to study the propulsion mechanisms. And he said essentially what he discovered with the layout of, I'm not going to get into the details, but the layout of how magnets and rotating electric fields
I've seen it.
were generating.
Yeah, that's what I was just explaining to you.
It was a way to turn, it was a way to turn the gravity vector on its side, right?
That's why, like, if we can communicate, which we can with some other intellectual, intelligent life, you know, you see these, they call it the flying saucer, and they would laugh at those like as an old model because you see it kind of, because that's what it's doing,
it's
right?
Obviously got a fan in the bottom,
right? It's like turning on and turning off and turning on. It's like a 1950s car. You know,
yeah. That is funny.
It's funny because if you are creating that anti-gravity field, the problem they're having and a magnetic field at the same time, the frequency has to be precisely the same, because if it isn't,
equal and opposite forces, right? And it is possible if you think about it fundamentally, right? Again, back to the hydrogen atom example, right? The proton is about 1,836 times more massive than the electron. Now they both have equal and opposite charges of 10 to the plus 19 coulombs versus 10 to the minus 19 coulombs of force, but the mass, right? Einstein tells us energy is mass. So if you think about gravitation being electromagnetic in nature and you want to break it down to the fundamental level, the hydrogen atom is a perfect example. The proton, the Earth being overall negatively charged at its surface, right? All the way up to about a meter, you get about 1100 watts of power.
Yeah.
So it's negative charge and the positive charge of the protons, there's your gravitation. Now, the protons attract because they are positively charged. Opposite charges attract. The electrons repel.
Yep.
So the protons essentially are the reason why things fall. And the electrons are the reason why we're able to pick things up. So the proton being 1836 times more massive and thereby, according to Einstein's equivalence principle, more energetic than the electron is a reason why we have gravitation. And that can be explained so fundamentally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Alzafon, his son just wrote a book. I just read it. I'll get you a copy. I believe they figured it out in that book.
Nice. Because I mean, it goes.
It's pretty good, man.
That sounds good. So, also, one more thing is that finding these connections. Now, going back to finding these connections to ancient Western philosophy, and if you were to look at the Kircher Kabbalistic tree of life, you would notice that one pillar on the left is negatively charged, another pillar on the right is positively charged. After the initial bifurcation, why? Why would you need opposite charges? The only reason you would need opposite charges or a potential and a void is if you are creating an electromagnetic circuit.
And the interesting thing about bifurcation is that energy is going, you have to slow it down, because if you don't and you're going into a split, it causes a clash. Think about that for a second. That way there has to be a certain speed so that it can flow anytime you divide. So like our heart right now, my heart's beating, it's pumping blood, but it's clashing because of the split here, right? So Kundalini teaches us that if I can just reduce my heart rate by meditation a little bit, it's very subtle. That blood's going to go down. It's not going to clash now. It's going to start carrying itself up. It's going to carry up spinal fluid. It's going to come up into my brain. It's going to start vibrating those ventricles at 7.5 hertz. You know what that is?
Schumann resonance.
Starts going, vibrating them like a domino effect. If you can be utterly still, and I'm talking no thoughts, no movement, right? You'll feel that vibration going across the homunculus. As it comes around, it hits that drum that's connected to the two hemispheres of the brain, and the brain's just like jello, man. You just barely touch it and it's jiggly, you know. And that frequency, because you've done this, will hit 7.5. It'll fuse the two hemispheres, right? And it creates that neuron we were talking about of enlightenment, right? And enlightenment is the key, is to keep that neuron going, right? So through meditation practices, even with myself, I can get people to get the neuron going. The key is keeping it going. Because when you get it going, you can access what I call the singularity, the point where everything is, where it all's already happened, right? You can access it. This is how you access remote viewing. This is, stuff like that. We just put sticky notes and send people in there to get info, basically.
Yeah.
But there's a mechanism in the human body, and you go back to the creation story. If you take that story, because it's also philosophical, there was no light. That's the first chakra. And then there was light. Now my attention isn't on the material. It's like, whoa, what's this light?
Yeah.
Right? And then if you go through the creation story through those chakras, it's the same unfoldment. Just philosophically. So philosophy and science, what we're doing right now, it's finally, it's coming together. The alchemists aren't having to do this under the king anymore. It's beautiful. We have the freedom to be able to talk about it. And when you talk about there's no empty space, you're right. When you take an atom, or the proton specifically, and you start adding movement to it, and you start having it pick up speed, because of the quantum, it's going through soup. It's not going through something blank. So it's picking up resistance. And if it's picking up resistance, what's going to happen?
And you know what? Scientists know that.
How do I
Scientists
know it?
know
I'm not a
that.
scientist. They gotta know this
Hey, but
shit.
you know it. Scientists know this. So guess what? Guess what? Now we have something that interference, almost like moving through molasses, and yet, but we can't say Einstein's wrong. The universe must be empty. So what do we do now? We invent a Higgs boson to create that molasses-like requirement nature. And what do you need for a Higgs boson? You need a Big Bang universe, for existence, which is finite,
Yeah,
spatially finite.
sure,
But you need, and I've heard this from a professor. I won't put him on the spot now.
sure.
No kidding. I heard this from a professor in 2012 teaching physics about the Higgs boson discovery, right? He said, imagine that you have infinitely sized capacitor plates of opposite charges, infinitely separate in distance. Mind you, he wants you to fit this in a finite universe. And that would create the electromagnetism required for a Higgs boson to have enough mass to manifest and create that molasses-like resistance nature in space-time.
Wow.
In an empty universe.
Wow.
So now they're inventing things just to cover something that may not be right.
And the best scientists in the world, and I love these guys, when I go back and say, hey, you said this in the past, and I've had a couple of them say this to me, yeah, that was dumb. Oh, I love that. Yeah, that was stupid. I shouldn't have said that. This is what I know now. That's our path.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
our path. That's our path. Right? I had to put something down. Wasn't right. Totally cool, but check this out. Look what I've learned from it.
But that's real science, right?
Yes,
that is real peer review, peer rated. So that's how you move forward. What we're not doing,
no money is blocking
that.
it.
Exactly. So now all the money
and no
is being
idiot behind the money is blocking it, which is even worse.
Keeping the tired old ideas alive, right? All they do is get old information, change a couple of variables, reword it, represent it to the investors and say, here's what we call a discovery, send more money.
Not good.
So yes, the true science is to learn from things, accept that we can be wrong. I could tell you now what I've told you today, I didn't know was true 5 years ago. So, So I
only know what I know today.
Absolutely, right? But that requires a certain level of being grounded, a certain level of humility, right? It's okay to be wrong. But
I love being wrong, man.
Absolutely.
Because I'm doing something.
There's no way, no
I'm
better
a skater,
way to learn, right?
So, we try things 1,000 times before we get it.
I
we
used to
punish
skate in
our
high
bodies.
School.
So it's second nature to me. Failing is getting there, inch by inch.
But there's a unique difference between failing and succeeding. Now, it's not about you fall and you don't succeed at it, so you try again, right? That means you haven't succeeded yet.
That's right.
But you have to consciously choose to fail by giving up. That's the only way to fail, right? Is you have to choose to give up.
It's a decision.
That's
You're
it,
so
right?
Right. You're so right.
So,
well, before we get into our big question, now I feel like I got to share this with you. Think of this with your physics mind database. Okay, we go into meditation. 3-day meditation. Kundalini, I'm out. Right. So far out, and what I see is a torus. Okay.
Interesting.
In the middle of the torus is a disc, and it's flat. On this side, it's white, pure light. And on this side, it's pure black. Okay. Stuff is coming out, and it's all around, right? It's all around. It's all moving up, coming down, and not only that, it's
also swirling.
It's also swirling, right? And what's happening is, and this thing is alive. It's conscious, and it's creating matter. And as it's coming around, the matter is coming together. It's coming together. It's coming together to a certain point where it's completely solid. I kind of zoomed in, saw our universe, came back out, and then it starts coming apart again. It goes right through that black.
Oh man!
And it's just going like this. And I sat there and I was like, and this is me, stoner brig skateboarder. What are you doing? And it said, I'm learning. So I just wanted to share that with you. Does that give you chills?
Absolutely, my brother, for sure. And let me tell you why, right? Remember earlier when we were discussing the planar orbitals of the planets around any solar system, right? That explains the nature of why. There's your positive charge, your negative charge. Now, the toroidal nature, which you were describing,
Yeah.
would also describe the expansion of the Big Bang universe, and then a deep freeze or a recontraction or a collapse, or you know what I mean? I mean, these theories are out there. It's in the minds of physicists coming up with these concepts. So there is something fundamental there, and that's what I think we
Yeah.
need to focus on,
It's
especially when
fundamental.
communicating. We got
Yeah.
to focus on, okay, what is the common ground? What do we all agree on?
Yeah.
That's the beginning of communication.
That's it. So it leads us to the question. With all your experience, especially in the military, where your life is on the communication is key.
Yep.
How can we better communicate as human beings?
I think that fundamentally we have to learn to listen. There is a defense mechanism that most people walk around with, right? Manifested by the ego, and that's just for self-preservation. Sometimes people don't want to share their day, they don't want to be asked, right? So if you need to communicate with this individual in general, you kind of have to learn to ease into it, right? And if you know these things, then that's kind of burdensome knowledge, because now you know better, and you can't get away with, just simply messing with people, or just simply going along with something you know to be wrong. You can't do that anymore. But if you don't know any better, heck, I mean, I suppose that's how road rage happens. That's
Mm-hmm.
how street fights happen. And so fundamentally, we need to learn to listen. Or if we need that defense up because we're really processing something in our mind, we don't need any outside interference. That's fine too. But again, communicate like, I'm sorry, brother, I'm sorry, ma'am, or, my apologies. It's just not the right time. Please forgive me, right? Give them a smile and then part ways, because you can part ways either making a new enemy or just breaking contact, and you might even make a new friend. Who knows,
Beautiful.
right? So there's a choice we have to make at that point. Do we want to make an enemy or friend, or do we just simply need to disengage and not have to do either, right? And that's important, because I've had some very serious political discussions with another good friend from another state, right? We're in the same fraternity, and so we have that, right? We get along no matter what. Now, we had a lot of disagreements, but I heard him out.
Yes.
I heard everything he had to say. I kind of, kindly and gently inserted my perspective and what I thought, and patiently waited for him to process it. Now, if I would have argued with him, he wouldn't process anything. He would have shut me down already, right? So
The ego
gently and
comes out to
kindly,
defend.
exactly. So
We all got it.
so now we know that the ego is there, and it's
Yeah.
going to defend us,
Yeah.
each and every one, right? So now the first thing, on top of listening to an individual, the very next thing would be proper communication. How do you address an individual without any kind of offense, or to not have him want to put up that and just not listen to anything? I mean, you want to get something across, and you kind of have to find the right way to do it without any kind of emotion, but just like fact of what you know, and be open to it, right? So we spoke for hours, this brother and I, and at the end, I told him, I don't agree with your views, and I think that there's a lot to be considered, and I think we probably should do a little more research before, we start thinking on these things. Like, I'm not going to go out myself and spread, what I think to be right. I'll have a discussion or a conversation, but I'm not going to go put it out there as it's like a matter of fact, take this truth and roll with it because I said so. I don't do that.
Yeah.
But when people do, and they're addressing you, you got to remember point one and point two, right? Open, listen carefully, and be gentle with your communication, and only discuss what you think or know to be true, and address it appropriately. I think this to be true. Well, as a matter of fact, I know that this is true, right? Instead of just trying to spit everything as being a fact, right? That's the biggest problem, is that you have one person spitting what he believes to be facts, another person spitting what they believe to be facts,
And they can
and
both be totally wrong.
in the end, they might both be totally wrong, and neither of them is going to remember what the other said.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, the next day, no one's gonna. That's so funny.
yeah,
That's
I
true.
mean, so I think that it's just about being humble, being ready to be wrong
Yes.
by all means,
Yeah.
and correct the record if you are wrong. It's like, oh, my
Yes.
apologies. I'm so sorry. You were right. I didn't think about it that way. Right. That's how we move forward.
It
That's how
is.
we improve in communications. It requires a humility, and it requires a subduing of the ego. And most people don't know how to subdue the ego because most people believe they are their ego.
They haven't
Right.
become aware of it yet.
They
They have
haven't become
not become
aware of
aware of it
it's
yet.
it as a separate
That's
entity,
right.
but they give it control and they take the wheel, and now they're just
Buried in it.
observers. Now they're just
Yeah.
observers, no longer directors, right? So that is what we have to presume
Yeah.
when communicating, especially in today's busy hustle and bustle society. We have to presume that everyone has a level of defense, right? Some kind of ego manifested to protect themselves against any intrusions. And most people, I can tell you, probably a majority of us are going to have things that we're pondering on and thinking on and need to resolve on our own when we're driving,
Yeah.
or when we're
Especially if they're not
just sitting around. Yeah.
media literate. You know what I mean? That's something
Yeah.
Daniel was sharing. If you're not media literate, then you're just connecting to the media, and then you're regurgitating it, and then now nothing is.
Hey, hey, that's how propaganda works,
That's
right?
it, man.
I mean, you need to
That's
believe it and
it.
regurgitate it in order for it to work.
That's it.
And don't think for yourself, because we'll think for you,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah. Yeah. Great line.
so
Yeah. Not a
yeah,
great
that's
line, but
well, I
very
mean,
important
it's
line.
very important line, but a really sad truth.
It is. It is.
But
It's
yeah, when it comes to communication, I mean, um, you can also, you if you want to be a little clever about it, it's like, I need to tell this person over there, that lady with the glasses, for example, I need to tell her that, her inner wallet is falling out of her purse, you know. But I also am curious about what she's reading, because I like that book. How do I approach her? I want to have a conversation with her. I don't want to be too aggressive. I don't want to scare her away. I don't
yeah.
want to be too direct. It's like, hey, you're about to lose your shit, right? No, I'm gonna do, oh, hey, good morning. Hi. Oh, my name is Joel, by the way, but I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to let you know that you're about to lose your wallet from your purse. I want to make sure you get that real secured, by the way, right? Yeah. She might say, oh, thank you, I appreciate you. And I'll be like, oh, that's an interesting book you're reading.
Yeah.
And then go with that, right? So you got to look for some commonalities. You got to look for your approach. You got to be a little clever. You got to read the cues. You also got to, know a little bit about body language. Read the face. What are their emotions? What are
Yeah.
their experiences? Are they approachable? Or are they not? And all of these things are a factor, and it's not an easy thing. That's just inherent
I love.
because of the ego.
I love how you said. And I'm going to use this too. Take a minute. Just take a minute and ask the ego. Do you want to make an enemy or a friend here?
And that's
It's
it, right?
beautiful. Just that step right
It's
there
that
is
question.
is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Let's go to the philosophical question I have for you. As you know better than anybody, we are swimming in molecules and atoms and hadrons and massless gluons, and then those are being manipulated by the macrocosm, right? Which is the quantum field where things are appearing, they're disappearing. We're swimming in it. Briggs. I don't know where Briggs is in this molecular structure. It's just an accumulation of thought that's constantly reacting. Once in a while, maybe some consciousness will flow through it, and Briggs will go, "What was that?" At your age, at this moment, as an individual, 2025, what is this to you? What are you experiencing?
Well, I think that you kind of answered part of it in the question. What is this experience? I think it is a unique experience to every single individual, right? Because we don't see objects for what they are. We can only see the light reflecting off of them. If we were to be able to see to the atomic level, we would realize they're mostly empty space. So what is it then, right? It's something that is information external that is external to what we call the self, including other people, right? It's information that our eyes receive and our brains interpret. Now, it is our brains that project what we call reality, right? So it's kind of like a hologram or a video game, right? You are the center of it. You are the universe. As above, so below, right? As without, so within. So now I can say for a fact that I am here. I cannot say for a fact that you exist. I cannot confirm that other individuals around us exist. I cannot confirm that that bird flying overhead is real. But I can confirm that I am observing all of this, and it
Yes.
must be that it's my brain projecting it. So I think it's something of a colloquial experience, something universal. We are all of the same material. We are all of the same energy or spirit, because everything within the universe is of necessarily of the universe, right? So there is no separation of anything. I mean, as Neil deGrasse Tyson said after Carl Sagan, we are star stuff. The same thing that makes stars and galaxies is what makes us up, right? So there is an inherent universal connection. But it's not in this experience, though. It's somewhere above us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that it is a unique temporal experience of our nature as eternal beings. Why? Well, that's a different question, right? But I do believe we have an absolute purpose for this experience. And that's what I feel it is.
That's beautiful. Sometimes my wife and I will, we've had some experiences. We both believe our individual spirits have gone through this conscious simulator a couple times, and with this go around, we've kind of realized maybe this go around both of us wanted to be parents. That's what we've exceeded at,
Uh,
mostly, and it's pretty awesome,
that
man.
is awesome. You know what? I've thought the same thing.
It could be
I've
that
thought the
simple.
same thing. I think that my wife
What's it
is
like to
my
be a
soul partner. Yeah, my
Yeah,
soulmate,
man.
literally. I mean, transcending
Yes.
space and time and
Yeah, same
lifetimes,
here.
right? That's what I believe. I
Same
believe that we
here.
would just always find each other in every life.
Joel, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This was so fun.
Yeah, of course.
I hope everybody enjoys the conversation we had, and I hope you have me back sometime, actually, because we got a lot more to talk about.
Oh, yeah, so much more, man, for sure.
Thanks, brother.
Hey, it was a pleasure.